Did I do any wrong? When my grown son told me I wasn't allowed to visit his house for Christmas, I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry right away. I just smiled, got into my car, and made one phone call. By the time the calendar flipped to the new year, I had completely stopped their house payments. Their perfect life was about to fall apart. And trust me, that was only the very first step of my plan. Justice had to be served, and their arrogance needed a big, painful lesson. You truly will not believe the things I did next. But before we dive deeper into this amazing story, please do me a huge favor. Subscribe to my channel right now. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the rest of this tale. Also, let me know in the comments below where you are listening from. I love seeing how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to the day everything changed. I was getting ready for the holidays, I said, settling comfortably into Elias's big, soft leather couch. You know, I could make my famous holiday turkey this year, I suggested, my voice warm. The one with the special sage stuffing that your mother, Clara, used to absolutely love. Remember how she always said it was much, much better than her own grandmother's recipe? The words hung in the beautiful, fancy air between us. The air smelled strongly of expensive vanilla from Veronica's fancy candles. Elias shifted on the couch next to me. The light from their very tall, perfectly decorated Christmas tree caught the shine of his wedding ring. I noticed something change in the way he sat. His shoulders pulled inward, like he was getting ready for a punch. Dad, he said, and the word felt heavy. I'm really sorry, but you won't be able to come here for Christmas this year. The words hit me hard, like a sudden slap. I blinked, sure that my hearing had failed me. What are you saying? Why wouldn't I be welcome at your house? Elias wouldn't look at me. His eyes were glued to the expensive marble coffee table. I had actually helped him choose that very table last spring, back when Veronica decided their old furniture wasn't fancy enough for her. Veronica's parents are coming to visit, he finally mumbled. And they would really prefer it if you weren't around. My hands turned cold as ice. They would prefer it. It's honestly easier this way, Dad. You know how her family is about their holiday traditions. They have their own special way of celebrating. His voice became smaller and smaller with each word, like a balloon losing all its air. I slowly looked around the living room. I saw the fancy silk curtains. I had paid for those when Veronica complained about people being able to see in. I saw the beautiful hardwood floors. They came from the money I got when I had to take a second loan on my own home. I saw the expensive crown molding around the ceiling. It had maxed out my credit card. Every single part of this beautiful house had my fingerprints all over it. It was a clear sign of my sacrifice, my hard work, and my deep love for my son. Their own way? I repeated, speaking very slowly. And what exactly is that way, Elias? He winced. Dad, please. Don't make this any more difficult than it has to be. Through the archway to the kitchen, I could easily see Veronica's brand new, huge kitchen mixer. The one that was a professional grade and that she had absolutely insisted she needed for her holiday baking phase. That phase lasted exactly 3 weeks. It was a $2,000 mixer, all from my pocket, and it had probably been used only twice since the beginning of October. So, where am I going to spend Christmas then? The question came out much quieter than I meant it to. Elias's face looked like it was falling apart. Maybe you could, I don't know, maybe visit your sister, Aunt Sophia, or we could do something the weekend right after the holiday. The weekend after? As if Christmas was just a simple appointment that could be rescheduled whenever it was convenient for them. I stood up. My knees ached and protested after 8 long years of carrying this heavy financial burden all by myself. I understand, I said. I see how things are now. I was already walking toward the door. I walked past the family photos where my face grew smaller and smaller, more and more distant in every new picture. I walked past the closet that held Veronica's collection of expensive coats. My hand finally found the doorknob. It was solid and cold under my palm. Son, I said, without turning my body around. Tell Veronica's parents this for me. I paused. Feliz Navidad. The cold December air hit my face like a strong wind as I walked toward my old pickup truck. Behind me, I heard Elias call my name once. Then came the soft, final click of the door closing. The decision was final. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, the engine off. I just watched the pretty Christmas lights shining in the windows of houses where I knew I would never be welcome. My phone buzzed. It was probably Elias, trying to smooth things over with empty promises and heavy guilt. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the key in the ignition. I drove straight into the darkness, leaving behind the warm, soft glow of the big, beautiful house that I had paid for, but that I would never belong in. The heater hummed loudly against the freezing cold of December, as I drove through the familiar streets toward my own simple house. Redwood hills spread all around me. Every corner, every street, held memories of the man I used to be. The man who truly believed that family was everything. The man who would give his very last dollar just to see his son smile. That man, I realized, was a fool. I stopped at the red light on West Street and Grand Avenue. I watched a young father happily load huge Christmas presents into his SUV. His children pressed their excited faces against the car window, their breath fogging the glass with their anticipation. Once upon a time, that had been me and Elias. That was before Veronica. That was before I became nothing more than a walking, breathing ATM machine with emotions that were simply inconvenient for them. The numbers started tumbling through my head, over and over, like a broken slot machine that just wouldn't stop. $2,800 every single month, for 5 full years. My calculator had finally given up trying to keep track of it all last spring when I had finally dared to add up the total. $140,000. That was more money than my wife, Clara, and I had saved for our entire retirement. Gone. Just completely gone. I pressed the gas pedal much harder than I needed to as the light turned green. My truck responded with a loud, aggressive growl that perfectly matched the terrible mood I was in. 5th Street. That was the street where I had taken out a new loan on my house. Our house, Clara's and mine, just to cover the huge down payment on their new place. The loan officer had looked at me with a look of pity that I hadn't recognized at the time. "Mr. Salazar?" he had asked carefully. "Are you truly sure about this? You are putting a tremendous amount at risk for someone else's investment." Someone else's investment? It wasn't my son's future? It wasn't my family's security? It was just someone else's investment. Lincoln Street. That was the exact spot where I had taken out that second loan on my home, 2 years ago, when Elias had lost his job. "Just temporary, Dad. Just until I can get back on my feet." Veronica had stood right behind him. Her $700 designer purse was slung carelessly over her shoulder. She was nodding sympathetically while, in her mind, she was likely calculating exactly how much my desperation was worth. Nothing. As it turned out, my desperation was worth absolutely nothing to them. I pulled into my own driveway. The concrete was cracked. I couldn't afford to fix it because every extra dollar had vanished into their perfect suburban dream life. The porch light flickered and sputtered. That was another simple repair I had put off because of them. Inside, my house felt empty and hollow without Clara's happy laughter, without the warmth of the family gatherings that would clearly never happen again. My phone rang as I struggled with my keys. The loud, sharp tone echoed off the empty walls. Veronica's name flashed brightly on the screen. She probably wanted to explain why I simply wasn't good enough for her parents' fragile feelings. Perfect timing. I had been waiting 5 long years to finally have this conversation. I answered on the 4th ring, letting her wait just long enough to wonder if I would pick up at all. "Leo." Veronica's voice was dripping with a fake, sticky sweetness. It was the same tone she always used when she was asking me to cover their water bill or their property taxes. "I heard about the little misunderstanding with Elias." "Misunderstanding?" I leaned against my kitchen counter, still wearing my heavy coat. "I don't think there's any misunderstanding, Veronica. You made your position crystal clear yesterday." Look, I know this might seem a little harsh, she continued, but you simply have to understand my parents' point of view. They are very traditional people. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays. A certain atmosphere, I repeated slowly. And what exactly does that involve? There was a noticeable pause. I could clearly hear the rustling of shopping bags in the background. She was probably out spending money that should have been going toward their house payment. Money that was, apparently, my responsibility. Well, they just aren't used to your kind of cooking. All that spicy food and loud music, she finally said. And honestly, Leo, they are educated people. They expect conversations about things like current events, literature, and art. You know. Things like that. Her words were a much harder hit than any physical punch could have been. 8 years of holding my tongue. 8 years of swallowing horrible insults for Elias's sake. 8 years of pretending not to notice the way she looked at me like I was some kind of hired help or cleaner. My kind of cooking? My voice stayed calm and level, under tight control. You mean the food that you ate every Sunday for 3 years when you and Elias had no money? The tamales that you specifically said reminded you of your grandmother? That was different, she said sharply. We were grateful then. But now, with my parents coming. Now with your parents coming, you can't have the simple man embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table. I finished for her. The fake sweetness instantly vanished from her voice. Don't be so dramatic, Leo. This isn't about anything to do with race or background. It's about class. My father graduated at the very top of his class from State University. My mother speaks 4 languages. They spend their summers in the coast. What exactly would you contribute to a dinner conversation? Stories about laying bathroom tile? Heat rushed into my chest, but my voice remained rock steady. I built a successful business from nothing after your husband's grandfather passed away. I have employed over 50 people in this city. I have paid more money in taxes than your father made in his best year. Money isn't everything, Leo, she scoffed. Breeding matters. Education matters. And frankly, Clara understood her place much better than you seem to understand yours. The phone line went dead silent. She had crossed a line. A line I didn't even know existed until she had stomped across it in her expensive, designer shoes. What did you just say about my wife? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. I'm just saying she knew how to fit in better. She didn't cause problems. She understood that some spaces simply weren't meant for her. My hand gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned completely white. Clara had more class and grace in her little finger than your entire family bloodline will ever possess. Oh, please, she practically spat. She was a house cleaner who simply got lucky. At least she had the good sense to keep quiet about it. Veronica. My voice dropped to a level I didn't even recognize. I want you to listen to me very, very carefully. This conversation is over. We are done pretending to be a family. You can't just. We are done, I repeated, and I calmly ended the call. I gently set the phone down on the counter. My hands were surprisingly steady. All around me, the kitchen felt different. It was smaller, yes, but somehow much cleaner, as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted from the air. I walked over to my desk in the corner. I pulled out the manila folder that I had been avoiding for months. Inside were bank statements, mortgage papers, and 5 years of automatic transfers that had bled me completely dry while they lived like royalty. It was time to stop the bleeding. The documents were spread across my kitchen table like pieces of evidence at a crime scene. 5 years of bank statements. Every single one showed the same automatic transfer, $2,800 on the 15th of every month, vanishing from my account and into theirs. It was a paper trail of my own generosity and, frankly, my own stupidity. I pulled out my calculator and started adding. The total, $143,400. And that wasn't counting the huge down payment. That wasn't counting the times I had covered their electric and gas bills when Veronica's obsessive shopping got out of control. That wasn't counting the new roof, the landscaping, or the fancy furniture that was apparently essential for their high-class life. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the numbers until they blurred together. Clara's life insurance money. My retirement savings. The college fund we had started for grandchildren I would now apparently never be allowed to see. All of it gone. Poured into a giant house where I wasn't even welcome for Christmas dinner. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for my bank. The automated system offered me options in English and Spanish. Customer service. This is Jennifer. How can I help you today? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said. My voice was more steady than it had been in years. I see the transfer you are referring to, Mr. Salazar. $2,800 monthly to First Federal Bank. Account ending in 7423. How long have you been making this transfer? 5 years, I said. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. And you want to cancel it effective immediately? I looked around my kitchen at my old appliances that I couldn't afford to replace. I looked at the walls that desperately needed painting. I looked at the windows that let in cold air because I had spent all my home improvement money on someone else's luxurious castle. Effective immediately, I confirmed. Done. The transfer has been successfully cancelled. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, I said, surprising myself with how truly good that single word felt. No, that's absolutely everything. I hung up and sat in the sudden, peaceful quiet of my house. Outside, the December darkness was settling over Redwood Hills. Christmas lights twinkled in the windows of houses where families were gathering without conditions, without judgment, without the need to hide who they really were. For the first time in 5 years, next month's budget would actually balance. For the first time since Clara passed away, I could afford to fix my porch light, buy decent, healthy food, and maybe even take a small vacation. I gathered up the bank statements, the mortgage papers, all the physical evidence of my foolish generosity. Then I walked to my fireplace. I struck a match and watched 5 long years of being a doormat turn completely into ash. The fire felt wonderfully warm on my face. Warmer than I had felt in years. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was probably Elias wanting to apologize, or maybe Veronica needing money for something essential, like new throw pillows. I didn't check it. Instead, I poured myself a glass of my very best whiskey, the bottle I had been saving for a special moment that never seemed to arrive. Tonight felt special enough. I raised my glass high to the empty room, to Clara's photo on the mantel, to the man I used to be, and to the man I was proudly becoming. Merry Christmas to me, I said, and this time, I truly meant it. The next morning was bright and clear. December sunlight streamed through my kitchen windows as I enjoyed my second cup of hot coffee. For the first time in many years, I wasn't constantly calculating how much money would disappear from my account in the next 3 days. The feeling of freedom tasted better than the expensive coffee blend I had finally allowed myself to buy. My phone rang at exactly 10:47 a.m. Veronica's name flashed on the screen like a bright warning sign. Leo. Her voice carried that familiar tone of barely hidden impatience. I need you to go and pick up my parents from the Crescent City Airport. Their flight from Lakeview arrives at 2 o'clock sharp. I carefully set down my mug, watching the steam slowly curl toward the ceiling. Veronica, did you completely forget about our little conversation yesterday? Look, whatever that whole thing was about, we need to focus on things that matter now. My parents need a ride, and you are the only person who has the time during the day. The sheer nerve of her was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't good enough to share Christmas dinner with her family, she expected me to act as their personal driver and chauffeur. And you are asking me to do this because that's what family does, Leo. They help each other out. She snapped, her irritation rising. Besides, let's be honest here. You're not my rival. You are far too weak to be my rival. So, just get in your truck and go pick them up. There it was. The final, harsh insult, wrapped up in a demanding order. What airline? I asked quietly. Sky High Air Flight 447. They will be at baggage claim carousel 3. She added, and Leo, they are expecting someone who can handle their luggage properly. Please don't embarrass us. I could hear her fingernails tapping against something hard. It was probably her granite kitchen counter, the one I had paid for when she decided that simple laminate wasn't suitable for her fancy dinner parties. Of course, I said. I'll take care of everything. Good. And wear something nice. Maybe that blue shirt you wore to Elias's graduation. They noticed little things like that. The line instantly went dead. She hadn't even managed to say thank you. I sat back in my chair, looking at my phone's blank screen. 2 p.m. Flight 447. Baggage claim, carousel 3. I glanced at the wall clock above my sink. 10:52 a.m. Plenty of time. I poured myself another cup of coffee, added an extra spoonful of sugar, and opened yesterday's newspaper to the crossword puzzle I hadn't finished. 7 across. Delayed gratification. 12 letters. The answer would definitely come to me eventually. At exactly 2:15 p.m., I was perfectly settled into my favorite armchair. I had a fresh cup of Earl Grey tea and was reading the Sunday edition of the Crescent City Review. The crossword puzzle from yesterday lay completed on my coffee table. Delayed gratification had been postponement. My phone suddenly buzzed against the wooden table surface. Veronica's name again. I just let it ring. The bright December sun slanted through my living room windows, warming the exact spot where I had spent so many lonely evenings counting the real cost of my generosity. Today, the silence felt completely different. It felt earned. It felt intentional. 2:47 p.m. The phone buzzed again. This time, I could read the start of her text message. Dad, where are you? My parents are. I simply turned the phone face down and returned to the sports section of the newspaper. The Seahawks had lost again. Some things truly never change. By 3:30 p.m., my phone had buzzed a total of 6 times. I had finished reading the entire newspaper. I had brewed a second pot of tea. I had even started organizing the dreaded junk drawer in my kitchen. It was amazing what you could accomplish when you weren't rushing around to serve people who thought of you as their personal helper. The 7th phone call came at 3:45 p.m. Instead of Veronica's name, I saw a familiar unknown number. It was probably her parents borrowing someone's phone at the airport. I let that one ring too. Outside, a friendly neighbor was happily hanging Christmas lights on his porch. His children were running around the yard with the crazy, manic energy that only December afternoons could bring. Normal families doing normal things. No one was stranded anywhere, waiting for someone who would never come. 4:15 p.m. My phone started ringing and did not stop. Veronica, then the unknown number, then Veronica again. The buzzing became constant, like an angry wasp trapped against the glass. I walked to my kitchen and gently unplugged my main phone line from the wall. Then I turned my cell phone completely off. Perfect, absolute silence. I made myself a toasted cheese sandwich and heated up a can of delicious tomato soup, simple comfort food I hadn't allowed myself in months because every dollar I spent on food had gone toward making ends meet while subsidizing their expensive life. The cheese melted perfectly, golden brown. The soup steamed gently in my favorite mug. Outside, the winter sun was already beginning to set, casting long, dark shadows across my backyard. Somewhere across town, 3 people were likely standing in an airport parking garage, arguing about the high price of a taxi, and wondering how their personal helper had the complete nerve to strand them. The thought made my soup taste even better. By 5 p.m., I had eaten my simple dinner, loaded my dishwasher, and was thinking about what movie to watch. It had been years since I had an entire evening to myself, without worrying about an emergency call for money or a last-minute favor. I was reaching for the remote control when someone started pounding on my front door. It wasn't a normal knock, it was an aggressive, violent hammering that rattled the whole frame and clearly announced pure fury. I set down my tea and walked slowly toward the sound. I already knew exactly who I would find on the other side. The pounding got louder as I approached the door, each hit more aggressive than the last. Through the small peephole, I could see 3 figures crowded onto my small porch, looking like wolves circling their prey. I opened the door to find Mr. Theodore Ted Jenkins's red, furious face only inches from mine. "What in the world is wrong with you?" he shouted, pushing right past me and entering my living room without an invitation. "We waited at that darn airport for over 3 hours." Mrs. Patricia Jenkins followed him. Her usually perfect hair was now messy, and her lips were pressed into a thin line of pure, cold hatred. "This is simply unacceptable behavior from someone your age, Leo. It is absolutely rude and barbaric." Veronica brought up the rear. Her expensive designer coat was wrinkled. Her makeup was smeared. "You completely humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents had to take a $40 taxi ride just to get here because you decided to leave us." My voice cut through their angry shouting like a knife through silk. They stopped mid-rant, shocked by the sudden steel in my tone. "Excuse me." Mr. Jenkins's face went from red to a terrifying purple. "You do not get to make demands here, buddy. Not after what you pulled today." "This is my house," I said quietly, not moving from my position by the door. "And I want you all out now." Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward. Her voice was dripping with the kind of snooty rudeness she had perfected over decades of looking down on people like me. "Leo, you clearly do not understand the seriousness of your mistake. My husband has strong connections all over this city. Business connections. Social connections. You cannot treat people like us this way and expect." "This was a lesson for you," I interrupted, meeting her gaze straight on. "A lesson about your excessive arrogance and your terrible treatment of people you believe are beneath you." Veronica's mouth dropped open. "A lesson? Who do you think you are to teach anyone anything? You're a nobody. I am someone who finally stopped being your personal bank account and taxi service." I stepped aside and held the door open wide. "The lesson is over. You can leave." Mr. Jenkins angrily jabbed a finger toward my chest, but he didn't quite dare to actually touch me. "You have no idea who you are messing with, old man. I've been in this town longer than you've been breathing its air. I know people, important people, people who can make your life very, very difficult." "Is that a threat, Mr. Jenkins?" "It's a promise." His voice dropped to a low, menacing whisper. "You think leaving elderly people stranded at an airport is just something you can do without consequences? You're about to learn exactly how wrong you are." Mrs. Jenkins nodded in agreement. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Indeed. Actions have consequences, Leo, and yours will be quite public." Veronica quickly grabbed her father's arm. "Daddy, let's just go. This pathetic old man is not worth our time." They all filed out of my house like a defeated army. But Mr. Jenkins turned back right at the door. "You will regret this," he promised. "I absolutely guarantee it." I closed the door behind them and turned the deadbolt with a very satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them all pile into their rental car. They were still loudly arguing among themselves as they drove away into the cold December darkness. The house felt cleaner with them gone, as if their nasty presence had left a stain that was only now lifting. But their parting words echoed in the sudden quiet, public consequences, important people, connections. I walked back to my living room and picked up my tea. It was still warm in my mug. For the first time in this entire mess, I felt a slight bit of concern. But it was completely overwhelmed by something much stronger, anticipation. 3 days later, I was calmly enjoying my morning coffee and looking through the Crescent City Review when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 3. The headline read, "Prominent Businessman Abandons Elderly Couple at Airport During Holiday Rush." My hands went completely still around the coffee mug. There I was, in black and white, an old, slightly blurry photo from my company's website, probably 5 years out of date. Below it was a story that made my blood run cold and my anger flare up in equal measure. The story claimed that Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were left stranded at the Crescent City International Airport for over 4 long hours when their family member, Leo Salazar, failed to appear for a prearranged pickup. The article stated. The couple, both in their late 50s, waited in freezing temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. Winter storm warning. It had been a beautiful 52 degrees and completely sunny. We simply couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that. The article quoted Mr. Jenkins, a retired banking executive. We called him repeatedly, but Mr. Salazar never answered his phone. We were forced to take a very expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment is not just rude, it's absolutely dangerous. The article continued with quotes about my supposed pattern of strange behavior and concerns about my mental state. Mr. Jenkins had perfectly painted himself and his wife as helpless victims of a cruel old man who had suddenly lost his mind without any reason. There was absolutely no mention of the Christmas dinner rejection. No context about Veronica's demands. No information about their years of financial exploitation. Just me, the villain, who had abandoned poor, innocent, elderly tourists during a blizzard that existed only in Mr. Jenkins's imagination. I carefully folded the newspaper and set it aside. My mind was already shifting into the detailed planning mode that had built my business from nothing. This was no longer about airport pickups. This wasn't about Christmas dinner or house payments. This was about winning. I pulled out my laptop and began typing names into search engines: Theodore Jenkins, Patricia Jenkins, Veronica Salazar. Their social media profiles, their connections, their habits, their weaknesses, everything they had foolishly made public over the years. If they wanted to play a game of chess, I was going to show them what a true, experienced strategist looked like. I glanced at my wall calendar. December 18th, 7 days until Christmas. 7 days to plan something that they would never, ever forget. I spent the next 3 days completely immersed in a different world. Not the world where I was Leo Salazar, the broken-down old man who let his family walk all over him. This was the world where I was Leo Salazar, businessman, strategic thinker, a man who had built something from nothing and was absolutely not about to let a bunch of spoiled, entitled people destroy what I had worked 40 years to build. My laptop became my command center. Social media profiles filled my browser tabs like playing cards in a high-stakes game. Theodore Jenkins, retired bank manager, member of the Fancy Country Club, treasurer of the local Business Leaders Association, a man who had spent his entire career in positions of trust and influence, a man with a lot to lose. Mrs. Jenkins's Instagram painted a perfect picture of a sophisticated life, charity events, wine tastings, vacation photos from the lake tagged with "Blessed Life." Every post was carefully created to project success and luxury. Comments from friends praised her elegant taste and inspiring lifestyle. All of it was built on other people's money, including mine. Veronica's social media timeline told the real, ugly story, posts about our beautiful home, with photos of the kitchen I had paid for. Check-ins at expensive restaurants during the same months when I was covering their utility bills. A status update from last week. So excited for Christmas dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skills. Our home. Our success. The selfishness was truly breathtaking. But it was Elias's professional profile that gave me the final piece of the puzzle I needed. His recent activity showed a new connection. Dahlia Morgan, lifestyle editor at the Crescent City Review. The same Dahlia Morgan who had written the terrible article about me. I leaned back in my desk chair, looking at the clear evidence spread across my screen. These people had made 3 huge mistakes. They had completely underestimated me. They had gone public with their attack, which meant I was free to go public with my response. They had documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect catalog of hypocrisy. I opened a new document and began typing. It was a timeline. 5 years of financial support, all documented with clear bank statements, receipts, and canceled checks. The down payment for their house, $47,000 from the loan on my own home. The kitchen remodel when Veronica decided fancy granite counters were essential, $18,000 from my credit card. 60 monthly house payments of $2,800 each, $168,000 and counting. $250,000. More than I had spent on myself in the last 10 years. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Probably Veronica, trying a new angle. I ignored it and kept working. By the evening, I had everything perfectly organized in a thick manila folder. Bank statements, receipts, photos downloaded from their social media showing off the purchases I had funded, and a printed copy of the newspaper article with my handwritten notes in the margins, clearly documenting each lie and distortion. I looked at my wall calendar. December 24th was circled in bright red. Not because it was Christmas Eve, but because it was the absolutely perfect day for justice. According to Veronica's online event page, they were hosting Christmas dinner for 12 people, family, friends, neighbors, and important members of their social circle. The exact kind of people who deserved to know the truth. I closed my laptop and walked to my kitchen. I got my good camera, the one I had bought years ago to take photos of job sites for my business. It was time to put it to work documenting something else entirely. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Tomorrow, Theodore Jenkins and his entitled family were going to learn what truly happens when you declare war on someone who actually knows how to fight back. Christmas Eve morning was gray and cold. The kind of winter day that made you feel grateful for warm houses and family gatherings. Too bad I wouldn't be welcome at either. But I had other, much better plans. I laid out all my evidence like a skilled lawyer preparing for a big trial. Bank statements were organized by year. Each monthly payment was highlighted clearly in yellow. Receipts were arranged in time order, showing the clear pattern of my support for their luxurious lifestyle. Photos were printed from their social media. I copied the documents 12 times. One for each person at the dinner. The newspaper article went on top of each pile. My red pen notes were clearly visible in the margins. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue one I had worn to Clara's funeral. It was pressed and ready for another kind of farewell. Today, I was saying goodbye to the man who had been a doormat for his family. Tonight, I would be someone who commanded respect. At 6:30 p.m., I loaded my briefcase with the packets of evidence and drove to the Silver Lakes neighborhood. Their house glowed with warm, golden light. Cars filled the driveway and lined the street. Through the front windows, I could see people moving around the dining room. Veronica was playing the perfect hostess in the beautiful home that my money had helped them buy. I parked across the street and checked my watch. 6:45 p.m. perfect timing. Late enough that everyone would be seated for dinner. Early enough that they would still be on the main course. There would be no easy escape for anyone. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. I let myself in quietly. The warm air hit my face, along with the loud sounds of laughter and conversation from the dining room. Then I heard Mrs. Jenkins say, "But darling, that's simply not how we do things in our family." This was followed by more laughter. Our family. After everything they had done to completely exclude me from it. I walked right into the dining room, carrying my briefcase. 12 faces instantly turned toward me. Their expressions ranged from total surprise to pure horror. Veronica froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Elias's face went completely pale. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins looked like they had just seen a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said calmly, setting my briefcase gently on their marble serving table. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." Veronica found her voice first. "Leo, this is totally inappropriate. You need to leave right now." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out the first stack of papers. "I truly think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and this entire lifestyle you've been so proudly showing off." A woman I didn't recognize, probably one of Mrs. Jenkins's charity friends, leaned forward with great curiosity. "What is he talking about, Veronica?" "He's having some kind of emotional episode," Veronica said quickly. "Elias, call someone!" But I was already moving around the table, placing a packet of documents neatly in front of each person. "Here are the bank records," I said, my voice conversational. 5 years of financial support. $168,000 in house payments alone, plus the huge down payment, the renovations, the furniture, the appliances. Everything you see around you. The room went completely silent, except for the loud rustling of paper as 12 people began carefully examining the evidence. I watched their faces change as they absorbed the numbers, the dates, and the undeniable proof of my generosity and their massive deception. "This is outrageous," finished the woman across from him. "Veronica, why didn't you tell us any of this?" Veronica's perfect composure was completely cracking. "It's more complicated than it looks. Leo volunteered to help us. We never even asked." "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out the newspaper article. "Let's talk about what you did ask for, and what you told the media about me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I placed copies of the newspaper article on the table, watching as the dinner guests immediately recognized my photo from the terrible story that had run 3 days earlier. "No," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "Let's talk about the real manipulators in this family." Mr. Jenkins's face had gone from red to pale white. Mrs. Jenkins sat rigid in her chair, her wine glass completely forgotten in her hand. "Mr. Jenkins here used his powerful banking connections to plant this fake story," I continued, tapping the newspaper. "Notice how I'm portrayed as mentally unstable and dangerous, abandoning poor elderly people in freezing weather." A gray-haired man in an expensive sweater looked up from the article. "Ted, what is this about?" "The weather was 52 degrees and sunny," I said before Mr. Jenkins could answer. "And they weren't stranded tourists. They were Veronica's parents, coming to the Christmas dinner I had been banned from attending because I wasn't good enough for their company." Mrs. Jenkins finally found her voice. "That's not... We never said..." "You never said what, Patricia?" I pulled out my phone, where I had taken a screenshot of several of Veronica's social media posts. "That I was too low class for your parents? That my simple food and working class conversation would embarrass you in front of your educated friends?" The woman I had identified as one of Mrs. Jenkins's charity friends shifted uncomfortably. "Patricia, surely you didn't." "He is twisting everything," Mr. Jenkins blustered, but his voice completely lacked any confidence. "This man has serious emotional and mental problems. The stress of aging, financial problems." "Financial problems?" I almost laughed out loud. "Mr. Jenkins, I've been supporting your daughter and son-in-law to the tune of nearly $3,000 a month for 5 full years. The only financial problems here are the ones you're about to have." I turned to address the entire table. "These people have taken over $200,000 from me while calling me names behind my back. They have manipulated my son against me, banned me from family gatherings, and when I finally stood up for myself, they tried to destroy my reputation in the newspaper." Elias spoke for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I didn't know about the newspaper story." "Your wife knew," I said quietly. "And her parents orchestrated it. They turned me into a villain simply for refusing to be their personal ATM and driver." The entire mood in the room was shifting dramatically. I could clearly see it in the guests' faces, the slow, gradual realization that everything they had been told about tonight's generous hosts was built on a mountain of lies. "This is absolutely appalling," said an elderly woman in pearls, staring at the bank statements. "Ted, how could you let your daughter take advantage of this man's generosity, and then attack him publicly when he stopped enabling it?" Mr. Jenkins's carefully maintained perfect image was crumbling. "You don't understand the full situation." "I understand perfectly," the woman interrupted. "This man has been supporting your family financially while you treated him like hired help, and when he finally said no, you tried to ruin his good name." Mrs. Jenkins's voice came out choked. "He abandoned us at the airport. After you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because my presence would be inappropriate for your parents," I said calmly. "After 5 years of paying their bills while you looked down on me for my simple background and education level." The silence was deafening. 12 people were staring at Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins with expressions ranging from pure disgust to deep embarrassment for having associated with them. Veronica made one last, desperate attempt to control what was happening. Everyone, please! This is just a private family matter that's gotten out of hand. No, I said firmly. This stopped being a family matter when you made it public. When you used the newspaper to attack my character. When you decided my reputation was acceptable damage for your own pride. I looked around the table at faces I didn't recognize but who now knew exactly who I was. I wanted all of you to know the truth before you read about Leo Salazar in the paper again, I said. Because you will read about me again. But next time, it will be the real story. I closed my briefcase and straightened my tie. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for. As I walked toward the door, I could already hear the eruption beginning behind me. Voices raised in accusation, questions demanding answers, the sound of a carefully constructed social image falling completely apart. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I had ever heard. The final letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. It was delivered by certified mail, carrying the heavy weight of legal consequences behind every word. Notice of default. Final demand for payment. The envelope read. Inside, 3 months of missed house payments had finally caught up with Elias and Veronica like a giant wave of reality. $8,400 in overdue payments. They had just 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure proceedings on the house I had helped them buy. I set the letter aside and returned to my coffee, reading it the way you would read news about faraway weather. Interesting, but no longer my problem. My phone had been ringing for weeks with calls that were getting more and more desperate. Even Elias's calls, which I had been ignoring out of a mix of anger and curiosity about how long it would take him to swallow his pride. He knocked on my door that Thursday evening. He was no longer the confident man who had excluded me from Christmas dinner, but someone who looked like he had aged 10 years in just 3 months. "Dad," he said when I opened the door. "We really need to talk." I stepped aside to let him in. I noticed how he looked around my house as if he were seeing it for the very first time. "Nice place," he said quietly. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of on people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling into my new recliner. "Coffee?" He shook his head, sitting carefully on the edge of my couch like he was afraid to get comfortable. "Dad, I need you to know how truly sorry I am about everything. Christmas dinner. The newspaper article. The way Veronica, the way we treated you. Go on. I truly didn't know about Ted planting that story. I swear I didn't. When I finally found out." He ran his hands through his hair. "God, Dad. The things they said about you behind your back. The way they talked about our family. About Mom's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of Clara, but I kept my voice level. "And what exactly did they say about your mother? That she knew her place better than you knew yours. That she understood boundaries." He couldn't meet my eyes. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence for a long moment. The heavy weight of 5 years of mistakes completely filled the space between us. "The house is in foreclosure," Elias finally said. "I know. We can't make the payments without." He stopped, seeming to finally realize how that sounded. "Without my help," I finished. "Without the money I was sending every month while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage. I know how it looks." Elias leaned forward, so he was looking at me. "Do you know how much money I sent you over 5 years? He nodded miserably. "Over $200,000. $237,468. I corrected. "I know the exact amount because I finally did something I should have done years ago. I added it up." His face crumbled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I truly don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, son. That money is gone. But more importantly, those years are gone. 5 years when I could have been building a genuine relationship with you instead of paying for your wife's fantasy life. I know. I know that now." He looked up at me with something that might have been hope. "But maybe we could start over?" Maybe there's a way to. Are you asking me to start paying the house payments again? The hope died in his eyes. We're going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Veronica's respect for me, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do. You'll figure it out, I said, not unkindly. The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them. He started to cry then, quietly, like a man who had completely run out of options. I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever. Elias, I said finally. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. There is a huge difference. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Is there any chance, any way you could possibly forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean pretending this never happened, or that I'm going to start paying for a lifestyle that came with the condition that I'd be grateful for the scraps of your attention. Then what does it mean? I stood up and walked to my mantel, where Clara's photo sat next to a new picture. Me with my sister Sophia and her family at Easter dinner. It means that if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build it from scratch. I turned back to him. It means showing me respect instead of demanding that I earn it. It means making choices based on what's right, not what's easy or convenient. I looked him straight in the eye. And it means that the next time someone, your wife, her parents, anyone, tries to exclude me from a family gathering, you'll remember who actually acts like family. He nodded slowly, understanding perhaps for the first time that respect wasn't something you could simply take for granted. The house, he asked quietly, isn't my problem anymore. I finished. You're a grown man, Elias. Figure it out like grown men do. Get a job that pays enough to cover your bills. Sell the house and buy something you can actually afford. Stop living beyond your means and expecting other people to pay for your choices. He stood up slowly, his shoulders straight for the first time since he had arrived. You're right about all of it. I know. He walked to the door, then turned back. Dad, for what it's worth, seeing you finally stand up for yourself at Christmas dinner. I was proud of you. Embarrassed and angry, yes, but proud, too. Good, I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. After he left, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey and stepped onto my back porch. Spring was coming to Crescent City. The trees were beginning to bud, and the air was warming with promise. I had wasted 5 of those years being a doormat for people who didn't appreciate sacrifice. I wasn't planning to waste any more. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Sophia. Dinner Sunday. The kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Real family, it turned out, was something you found with people who actually wanted you there. Everything else was just expensive, terrible theater, and I was finally done buying tickets to shows where I wasn't even welcome on the stage. The whiskey tasted like pure freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. If you found this story compelling and you believe that justice was served, please take a moment to like this video right now. Subscribe to the channel, and share your deepest impressions of this story in the comments below. To listen to the next incredible story, simply click